tennis court. I want to play
Tigre,
cricket.
ya
I dreamed
estás live.
cricket. I dreamed about cricket. I imagined cricket, and now here am I. And all these
What if
years,
I don't
having
wanna?
left India 4 decades ago, I still dream about cricket. I enjoy the game so much. It's a beautiful game. It's really a beautiful game. With the result, I concentrated very little on my studies. My life could
What
be
if it's
described
gotta
as
go like
punctuated
that? What
failure.
if I don't
That's what
want
it
it to go
was.
like that?
Punctuated failure.
Damn, let's go like
And in my book, I tell the story one day of taking the most severe thrashing from my dad. It's the way they knew how to do it. It was the time and culture in which they felt this is how they change you. I'm not blaming him. I'm just telling you it's the way it was. If my mother hadn't intervened, I think some bones would have been broken. The results would have been very costly. I was
El
a
Cesarucho.
small kid, and my dad really took it out on me that day. And the more I pondered this, I thought to myself, why? What's all this about anyway? You know, if you don't like the way you feel, why do you want to keep on feeling? And if I could describe it in one sentence, I really didn't want to feel anymore. Because what I felt, I didn't like. And I took from the science lab some poisons and tried to end it all. Very, very nearly succeeded. This happens quite often. My closest friend had doused himself with kerosene and burned himself to death because he had not succeeded in the exam. We live with that tension. Things are slightly changed, but the most suicide-rich time of the year is when the results are out in universities. When I came to know Christ, I wanted to put life together. There are 4 questions in life for all of us: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Where do I come from? What gives life meaning? How do I differentiate between good and bad? What happens to a human being when he or she dies? Origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. You have to find answers that are correspondingly true to each of these questions, and all put together, it has to cohere. There has to be coherence in this. There has to be a skin that pulls it all together. In reading John's Gospel, I couldn't read it actually. The gentleman who brought the Bible to me lives about 10 miles from here, but he himself is very close to the end of his life. Wanted so much to bring him here. I spoke to him on the phone about 2 months ago. He said, please let me come, but his situation is so weak right now. And he often said on the phone, he said to me that day, just after Christmas, he said, sometimes I think I came into this world just to be able to give you a Bible. Just to be able to give you a Bible. And that transformed my life as I walked out of there. John chapter 14 was read to me. Jesus said, because I live, you shall live also. If I can take a tail end to this, Jesus said, because I live, you shall live also. I knew it wasn't biological life. I trusted in him with the little prayer that I prayed and walked out of there and followed up with it with men and women who could teach me the scriptures, and life changed. One by one, the rest of the family, including my father, mother, all became followers of Christ. Even though we'd come from a priestly background, we lost the message of Christ somewhere along the way. When my mother died in her 50s, my dad asked me if I would preach at her funeral in Toronto. And I struggled with it. Then he said at the graveside, he said, son, what would you want to put on her gravestone? I said, that the verse that she first read to me without even knowing what it meant. So we put John 14:19. Jesus said, because I live, you shall live also. That was in 1974. In the 1990s, my wife's from Canada, went into Delhi. She said, can I see your grandmother's grave? You talk so much about remembering as a little boy going to that funeral. I said, honey, I don't know if we can find it. I tracked it down, went to the only Christian cemetery in Delhi, went to the registrar, found the register, tracked it down, found out I was only 9 years old in the mid-50s when she had passed away. Walked over to the plot, there was nothing visible. I hired a gardener with a shovel. I said, I'll be happy to pay you, please dig the soil and find the stone. So he's digging and digging and digging, and all of a sudden he strikes a stone. So he's gently moving it away, pouring water, moving it away, pouring water. And all of a sudden the words begin to emerge. The name of my grandmother, the date of her birth, date of her death, and then these words. Jesus said, because I live, you shall live also, John 14:19. The verse that brought me to him, that's on my mother's grave, was originally put on my grandmother's grave about something about which none of us as a family actually knew. The threads all came together. When Jesus came into my life, he didn't change what I did. He changed what I want to do. And I must tell you, because my father, if he were here, would tell me, he passed away, he said, tell him this truth too. I left from the bottom of the class to the top of the class after I came to know Christ and never left the top. Prior to that, my father used to say, center forward in football and fullback in studies. He never said that afterwards, so that's part of the story, yeah.
At the bar microphone? Yeah, go ahead. Is this thing on? Oh. All right.
Oh,
Thank you very much for being here. I'm a long-time listener, big fan of both of your work around your ministry. Thank you very much.
creo que ocupamos más luz.
The topic of intolerance. I wonder if you care to kind of discuss intolerance on the personal level versus intolerance on like the institutional level, because it seems that intolerance on the personal level, it's like, oh, okay, I can walk away and I won't see that person again. That's that.
No
but
bueno.
when it gets into the institutions, whatever that may be, whether it's the local Rotary Club,
¿Dónde te vas a llevar eso, tigre?
government, or anything
Tigre,
like
venga por
that,
acá con eso.
quite a hierarchy. Just wonder if you care to discuss that a little bit.
I was going to ask Michael to say something on that, but I'll save something.
Why are you
for him.
tightening up like that?
Yes, and I think, Michael, please feel free to pitch in here. My response would be fairly brief on that. I have found no better way than to sit down with the people. Institutions, evil does not run through the heart of institutions, it runs through the heart of people, men and women. It doesn't go through states or governments or organizations.
You can put filters on that?
If I find something that there is something
I
dishonorable
didn't know you could zoom.
I'll sit down and talk to the individual.
Being
Go and see the
normal.
powers that
Bush.
be. The best you can do is voice and say, look, this is what's
¿Qué anda haciendo el tigre ahora?
right. I don't think this is
Anda sacando galletitas.
done. I don't think
Anda sacando galletitas ese
so.
tigre.
I ask you, sir or ma'am,
Okay, we gotta
please
zoom
consider
out of
looking
here.
into this subject and changing the reality for us.
Normal.
Authorized by an institutional pattern here. And
How do we
I'll
do
most
that?
grateful to you
Look
for
at
that
this. They can put filters on this thing.
talking to you. You build that
Outrageous.
relationship gradually, but you never do it by
Bubbles.
lawlessness or anarchy or rudeness.
I know you can do this live. Hey,
You do it by
venga, trágamelo.
first instincts out of people.
Y los hacemos vivir.
Toughest of them change just by a period of relationship. Whenever I go into and stay in any hotel where I go to a place, I'll always go and ask to meet the manager. I'll go and meet the front desk person. I'll go and meet the maitre d', introduce myself. I say I'm here for the week. I look forward to enjoying this hotel and so on. And you know what? Through the middle of the week, they'll come to you and ask you if there's anything they can do, anything they can serve you in. It works that way even in institutions. Befriend the
This is
powers that
still
be,
working.
and you'll be surprised how some of them will open up and say, even though this is not what I would like to do, I respect for you, I will do it. This gets more serious in academic subjects, theses, dissertations. You can find yourself being marked out because you're not sharing
Whoops.
the ideas that one wants to share.
I really don't
You
know
just
how
have
to
to be
use
wise
this darn
how
thing.
you move in this and endure
Nonetheless, enjoy the
tedious journey.
César,
If you do it in an
¿dónde
honorable
fuiste?
way, in the end you will find truth will win out.
César.
Dr.
César.
Edson, would you have anything to add?
¿Te fuiste a comer, no?
I mean, I may have been interpreting your question slightly differently, but when it comes to tolerance at an institutional level, I think, I know certainly in Europe we've got ourselves in a little bit of a confusion here. I got a letter from the British Home Office, which is the, well, it used to be called the Home Office, which deals with justice as part of its things in British legal system. It looks after the police force, looks after the law courts. And they used to have a little motto that said, building a free, just, and tolerant society. And I can remember the first time seeing that logo thinking, I have a feeling that only 2 out of these 3 are possible. And let me just explain to you what I mean by that. The word tolerance has come to be defined today. We're not quite sure exactly what it means. Either it means, well, we just accept and agree with everybody. But historically, that wouldn't be right. In the past, when you talk about tolerating someone, the first thing you're assuming is you disagree with them. Because you don't tolerate what you agree with, right? I mean, if you agree with someone, you're not tolerating them, you're agreeing with them. But if you disagree
Eres
with
un
them,
buen pescador.
then you're actually passing judgment. No, I think what you're saying is wrong, and that could be morally or intellectually or whatever way. But you feel that it's important for you to allow that other position, even though you personally disagree with it. But when you talk about justice, and justice being upheld and enforced in society, you're not normally asking for tolerance to be exercised. So in a rape case that's argued before a judge, for a judge to rule at the end of the rape case, well, we caught the guy and he's definitely guilty, but, you know, we just have to tolerate these kinds of things. They just happen. And we've had laws against rape for hundreds of years and we've never eradicated it, so we just have to learn to deal with it. At that point, we have what seems to be a contradiction potentially there, which I think most people would instantly react against. The other problem we also have with tolerance is most of us think of it positively today. Tolerance is a good thing, even though most of us actually define it negatively. So, I mean, I'm only in LA just for a very short time. You know, so I arrive this afternoon, I leave tomorrow morning, and then I'm going to Cairo, which will probably be my last speaking engagement this year. And so just imagine you hear that I'm just briefly in town, you come to me and say, Michael, you're only in LA just for a few hours and would like to extend some hospitality to you. Let me take you to the very best restaurant here in LA. And obviously for that kind of invitation, I'd extend my sleeping hours beyond. It's now 5 a.m. in England. I mean, I'll be happy to stay back. We could have breakfast together. And I accept your kind invitation. And the next morning, you hear me talking to a friend of yours. You're standing behind me. I can't see you. And your friend says to me, I hear someone took you out to LA's nicest restaurant last night. Did you enjoy meeting them? And I say, yeah, they were tolerable. If you heard that, would you be happy? They say, did you enjoy the food? And I say, I could tolerate it. It's very interesting. We talk about tolerance, but I know very few people in this world who want to be tolerated, but I know a lot of people who want to be respected. But here's the key thing, because I said the idea of tolerance, freedom, and justice, maybe only two of those are possible. I'm not sure, in that sense, our common acceptance of the definition of tolerance is freedom. In the sense that if that is the way we're now going to take tolerance, we just simply accept what anyone says. We need to understand, therefore, that's also the end of all free society and all free discussion. Because you cannot tolerate someone and disagree with them. Because at the point of disagreement, if it just does mean acceptance, you're no longer tolerating them. But you can respect someone and disagree with them. And since the means by which we find to be able to disagree with one another over certain issues becomes foundational to all civilized society, I'm wondering whether at times, rather than having huge debates about what tolerance is or isn't, we should begin to ask what actually does it mean to treat other people with respect. Because I desperately want to live in a society where we learn to respect one another as individuals, even though we may disagree at certain level of ideas. There you go, I'll be to sleep now.
We'll take another live question over at the other microphone.
This question is for both speakers. If the transformative power of Jesus Christ is so great and it's the only way to live an abundant life and to never thirst again, how come we do not see more Christians living this transformed, abundant, spirit-filled life?
That is a very good question.
That's a really good question. If you would like to give me a list of names and addresses of all the hypocrites you know, I will be happy to go and pay some visits. I think your question is a very fair one. I think, as a matter of fact, I think it's more than fair. I want to be careful how I phrase this, because I'm part of the church. That's part of my identity. Ever since I myself became a Christian. But it does seem that the Bible has some very challenging words for the church. And as a matter of fact, just before coming up here, I was just reading through a speech that Dr. Martin Luther King gave.
Wow, está el ataque, el tigre,
right?
está el ataque. No lo dejen, no lo dejen.
Sorry, I'm in America, right? So I'm in the
No,
right
está atacando a todo
Just
el
checking.
mundo. Va a devorar a media ciudad. Atáquenlo, atáquenlo.
And
Row, row,
when he was put in prison, he very famously wrote a letter from prison, which is a very impressive letter to read. His letter from Birmingham jail. All the more impressive when you remember he wrote that letter from memory. And I always knew he was a political activist, and I knew various things about him. I have no idea how well read he was. And you can always tell something about someone when they're writing a letter and they're making reference both to philosophy and to law and to theology. He does it so well. But part of his letter, and I think it's something that needs to be heard
Eso,
today,
muy bien, tigre.
is he says,
Muy
we're living in
bien,
America
eso, menealo, menealo, menealo.
where
Menealo, menealo,
the
menealo.
church is espousing one thing with its lips, but it's
Eso
not
mero,
doing it with its
míralo,
life.
el tigre ya lo inventó,
He
el
says,
tigre
and
feliz.
therefore, he says, we are bringing a generation of people who
Tarararán.
absolutely lost
Ándele,
faith
ya se
in
le
the church.
escapó.
Many of them losing
Capturado.
faith in America as a country. And he shudders to think of the
¿Lo
violence it
tienes?
may hold and the division it may
¿Listo?
cause. United States of America as it went forward from that point.
Ah, se te
And he ends his
escapó.
letter with the words
Claro.
along the lines of, and now
Yes.
God's judgment rests
No.
on the church as never before.
Ah.
And I pray it may raise up in this
Otra vez.
decisive hour, and his voice may be heard. And what's more importantly, that it may actually live the moral values
Te voy a
which it
hacer arrancar
espouses.
una muela, ¿eh?
And so I think there has to be a challenge, and I think Scripture is very challenging to Christians about the way in which we live, and the means by which we live, and the values by which we live. And I'm going to have to confess that I think in the Western Church, we've excused ourselves from all of that, and we've claimed comfort and convenience as being the highest ethic,
Ah, se le fue.
rather than the principle of laying down your life in service for others. We're expecting everyone to lay down their lives in service to us, and that can't possibly be right. I think Raviji would probably agree with us and say, I know my experience is when I'm with the church in very poor parts of the world, when I'm visiting the church in parts of the world where you can be killed for simply becoming a Christian.
Uy, 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 uy.
The church I meet there is often very beautiful, very attractive, very humble,
¿Dónde
very
vas?
clear both in its message and in its lifestyle.
¿Dónde vas?
But our affluence seems to have choked the purity of that message. And so I think we need, if you like, a challenge to the church. And if you are a Christian here today, I think maybe one of the
Eso,
challenges,
mero,
as we're talking
muy
about
bien.
tolerance, would be that we are called to live a thoroughly uncompromised life. Now, it's maybe sad that when most people in this room, if you were to close your eyes and imagine a thoroughly uncompromised Christian, someone who was totally uncompromising in their Christian faith, we would immediately think of someone who was very harsh, very difficult, and very unpleasant to spend time with. But the Bible invites us to pass judgment on everyone who claims to be a Christian. And part of that judgment, we're told, is to look at the fruit of their life. And the fruit of their life, we're told, for everyone who claims to follow Christ should be love, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, and so on. So let's be thoroughly uncompromising about that. Let's just make sure that in no area of our life are we compromised in such that our lives are sending a message that will be inconsistent with the fruit that we're told to bear as Christians. So I think we may need to fall in love all over again with what it actually means to be a Christian, if you indeed are. And if you're not a Christian, if you've been put off by Christians, please don't reject the possibility of genuine life change and what it genuinely means to follow him, because you've encountered a few fakes. And it seems, especially in America, there's a lot of money to be made by faking it. Indeed, one friend I know who was training for the ministry said here, people will give a lot of money to authenticity, and if you can fake that, you've got it made. And maybe we just need to be maybe a little bit more, I think we do need to be more challenging with ourselves, and also as members of the church, with the church, to say, does this look like Jesus said it should look like?
We have a lot of people lined up at the microphone, so I think we'll just try to keep things moving and answer as many questions as we can. Over at the other microphone.
Great. Well, I'd first like to thank both of you. I came here today on a whim, and I'm certainly glad I did. So this question is focusing on Dr. Zacharias' talk today, but you're both certainly welcome to answer. As I understand it, and I hope that this hasn't been too reductionist of me, you've noticed three main trends, those focusing on secularism, pluralism, and privatization. And the one that I find particularly interesting is the role between secularism and the loss of shape in society and the implications that could have. Where I guess I see the most tenuous link is the possibility of totally secular societies or a faithless society still having a shame culture, still having a moral basis from some other foundation of moral understanding. I'd just like to hear from both of you what role you think faith has, what role the church has in maintaining morality, and if there is the possibility for that still like moral reasoning in the absence of faith.
Again, it's a great question. The most important word I think that we need to bear in mind is that the word sacred ought to define what morality means. Because Jesus Christ really did not come into this world to make bad people good. He came into this world to make dead people live. Moral rectitude and moral uprightness can be held by many, but if a person in themselves think I'm morally so good that I really don't need God, it's the most seductive form of morality, which ultimately leads you into some kind of arrogance or self-aggrandizement. And I remember yesterday, Professor Lowenstein and I, when we were in conversation, he made the comment that humility is the characteristic he sees so lacking in our society right now. And when you're humble before God, you recognize the need to be transformed. You recognize the need that you cannot pull yourself on. You're up by your own moral bootstraps. Every major religion of the world, I want you to hear me clearly now. Every major religion of the world is a works religion. Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Sikhism, Baha'ism, Jainism, all of them. You can take every one of them, it has to do with works. In Islam, your entrance into paradise is dictated by your good deeds outweighing your bad deeds. In Hinduism, every birth is a rebirth, and it's on the basis of karma, all that went on before. And your karmic cycle keeps going till you can break off this cycle and attain nirvana or moksha or whatever they want to call it. In the Christian faith, you first of all come not by virtue of moral capacity. You come by the gift and the grace of God, who offers you forgiveness, and you come just as you are in all of your failings. When the prodigal son comes home in that tremendous parable, it is so counterintuitive within Eastern culture. This boy took the father's money, spent it at a whim, plundered his life, did everything wrong, and he's gone. And now he decides he's going to come home. In Eastern culture, the father would never go out. He's been wronged. He would have to wait till the son came and literally threw himself at his feet and begged for mercy. But in the way Jesus tells the story, the Eastern father would have immediately sort of perked up his ears. The father leaves the porch, leaves the home, runs towards the son and embraces him and receives him. This my son was lost is found, was dead is alive. So morality is good living, is the fruit of your conversion and your commitment to Christ. It is not the means of your attaining salvation and attaining rightness in the sight of God. So what are the Ten Commandments all about? They were all about the fact that life is sacred, your word is sacred, your marriage is sacred, your time is sacred, your giving is sacred. And in the sanctity of life, these expressions come. But the Ten Commandments came after the Exodus. Redemption precedes righteousness. It is never the other way around. So God takes a life, puts that life back together, and gives you the fruit of what Michael was talking about. What does the church have to do here? I think the church has to teach us that that inner transformation is desperately needed. Let me say this very carefully. Listen to me carefully now. Malcolm Muggeridge said, the depravity of man is at once the most empirically verifiable fact at the same time that it is the most intellectually resisted. The depravity of man is the most empirically verifiable fact. At the same time, it's most intellectually resisted. If a man is stealing nuts and bolts from a railway track, says
Muy
D.L.
bien,
Moody, and you
Tigre.
send him to university, at the end of his education, he will steal the whole railway track. Some of the biggest crimes that have been committed against humanity sometimes are committed by high officers and high success stories. Depravity is here. Transformation, redemption, righteousness, and worship. That's the sequence. Morality alone will never get any one of us anywhere. It may make for some kind of existence, but it doesn't deal with the root of the
Deja
problem,
de oler
which
mis
is the rebellious heart
pantalones.
that needs to be corrected, and the
Mira,
heart that needs to humble
¿ven eso
itself
no?
before God. That's my word to you.
Dr. Ramsden, a word or?
Well, no, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think
Casi.
when morality is used, especially in a legislative manner to enforce conformity, we've often missed the point. The question has to come, is it actually possible to see transformation from within, and a new hunger and a new desire? If that is true at that point, what the morality is doing is governing the nature of your relationships, as opposed to just simply being something which you feel compelled to do. Because all relationships are morally governed. You can't be in friendship with someone you don't trust. And the friends are those who you feel are committed to you, and you understand that commitment to you in moral terms, in terms of their faithfulness and their goodness to you and all of those kinds of things. And so we need to bring some of that back, I think, into the vocabulary, as Dr. Zacharias has been saying.
We'll take another text-in question at this time. This question is for both Dr. Zacharias and Dr. Ramsden. What do you say to those who cannot believe in God because suffering exists and cannot believe that a good God would allow suffering?
I'd say it's a very good question. Well, maybe just a couple of things, because that's the kind of question that actually demands a very long answer. It might be the case for some people that when suffering comes, it's not simply the case that it may drive them away from God per se. It may simply be a catalyst that reveals to them what they actually thought about God in the first place. So if you find yourself caught up in suffering, you may, for some people, they'll find themselves driven into the arms of God because they believe He's there and He cares. And to others to walk away from the idea of God because they believe either He isn't there or He doesn't care. And so sometimes suffering simply acts as that catalyst. Let me suggest three possible things to turn to if you're interested. One of my colleagues, Vince Vitale, who is at Oxford, who's a philosopher who teaches with us, has done his whole doctorate on suffering. And he gave a very brilliant talk on the nature of suffering at Oxford University. Quite a hostile setting and Q&A. It's available online, and I'm sure if you got in contact with our minister at rzim.org, we could give you the link. Another one of my colleagues, also at Oxford, who's a professor of mathematics, was speaking down in New Zealand shortly after the earthquake there, which devastated
Y hay que dormirnos,
the
Cesarucho.
building, addressing members people who'd all lost family members in that great tragedy, and tried to address the problem there on ground zero. And I also know that Dr. Zacharias has also all the way back to the time he was when he was at Columbine High School. I know there was a whole series of talks recorded there, one of which was simply why. So I think I'll try to say two things. I'd like to try to say that there's some hope, not just simply existentially in terms of finding comfort with God, but maybe even coming to know that there is God through it. And if you're interested, that question itself probably deserves a much longer answer that could simply be stated here. And if that is your question, you happen to be here, I'm sure we'll be happy to put you in contact with the resources. I think we can make you a promise and say if you're not a Christian and you are wrestling with this issue, then we would like to give you those resources for free. If you are a Christian and you want those resources, you may be tempted to have a small crisis of faith right now. claim there's resources for free, and to you, we'd just like to remind you there will be a day of judgment and accountability. So those aren't for you.
Well, Michael, I'll take 2 quick stabs at that. Michael was an answer to prayer for long suffering for many, many years, yeah. We travel together and he keeps us all entertained. His wife has only 2 words all the time while we travel. It's, oh Michael, and then it comes one after another. There's 2 sides to that question. Let me just defang it philosophically and then move quickly to the application.
Non
It's not in the process of writing a book together on this. He just sent me an outline, so that's what I was doing actually last week, Bangkok Day, doing my 3-chapter share of that. Philosophically, it's often, of course, put in tandem with evil. Because when we say there's evil, we assume there's good. When we say there's